Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Layman's Lounge. Today, Wes and I are going to talk about, should the GMC have left the UMC? Should they have stayed? Should they have done Reconquista? Is this Retreatism? It's a worthy topic, and because as we all know, the General Conference of 2024, pretty much it was just a social justice liberal agenda full force, full throttle going on, and the world saw, the world laughed at it. It really is a tragedy and a sham. And so, it's something that we should talk about, because what's going on and what happened there is indicative of what's happening in all of Protestantism. So it's not just, okay, the UMC is facing it. No, everybody's facing it. And there's principles, there's guidelines that I think that we should learn from, because hindsight is 2020. Now, I just want to say, before we get talking, is that I'm not against people who are going to the GMC. I'm not against people who are in denominational split offs like the ACNA. I had a hard time saying that. So I'm not against that, but I am thinking that we should look at, okay, one, what's done is done, but learn from what's done is done, so we don't make the same mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, we're still bringing in just to be upfront, a retreatist attitude in many regards. And I think we have to watch for that. So
Can you give the acronyms and the definitions and just a little bit of history for the listener? So if someone's maybe new to Methodism, they're like, I'm seeing UMC, GMC, GMCC, an MC,
ABC.
What are all these acronym means, and a little bit of the history of the UMC and GMC?
So I mean, the UMC was a merger with the EUB, the Evangelical United Brethren, I believe in 1968. So they are the continuation of the Methodism that came from John and Charles Wesley and their compatriots. And over the time, they had different mergers, going on. And so the GMC.
Sorry to interrupt, but for the listener, from the 1800s, when Methodism developed, there were a couple different branches, but these mergers really consolidated them at the start of it. Would be the 19th century, correct? Mid 19th century.
Yes, correct. Yep. And the UMC, is the latest one, and now we have a GMC,
United Methodist Church.
I was going to say that UMC is United Methodist Church. Global Methodist is the conservative split off from the UMC. And what happened was, they've been battling for many, many years and decades, issues of liberalism, primarily had to do with homosexuality. And so here's the interesting thing. In 2019, the conservative Methodists, they voted. So Methodism is a conciliar, governmental church structure. So that means their constitution is dictated by votes as the church council coming together. And so every 4 years they have a general conference. And so the UMC at the time, pre-Global Methodist split off, they were, again, continuing to battle homosexuality. In 2019, they voted on the issues, again, of LGBT, but homosexuality, and all that fun stuff, related to it. And they won the vote. The conservatives won the vote. And so that means they could not change the UMC constitution, which is the Book of Discipline. That's the constitution for how the Methodists, or people call Methodists, should operate by within those stipulants. And so they upholded biblical traditional marriage. But what happened was, because of all the liberalism going on, and it was creeping in more and more, and the bad guys were in power, the conservatives felt that they should split off. And there was, even that gets into politics and legalities, because there was a disaffiliation where they had X amount of time. If they were going to leave with their churches intact, they better do it now. And so they felt like they were under the gun, as well as,
and that was late 2010s, right? That really came to the head, and churches were told that you can leave with your resources under the Global Methodist Church until this time period, correct? If I remember.
No, I think it was a little bit later than that,
okay.
Actually. I could be wrong on the history, but that's what happened. And so they formed the Global Methodist Church, and the reason why they're using the Global Methodist, because they want to be a global, not just one sect of the world, but a global church. And so the Global Methodist Church is now the conservative church of Methodism. But let me just say this, though, that doesn't necessarily mean every UMC is liberal. And it also doesn't mean, as I say that, doesn't mean they're conservative, but they might be moderate. But the point is, not everybody who's in the UMC is 100% liberal, and they're still faithful, Methodists in that mainline denomination branch. So it's not just all the good ones 100% went to GMC. No, that's not true. They're still within the UMC right now. Mm-hmm. And actually, I spoke with Jeffrey Rickman from Plain Spoken, and he even thinks that a lot of these churches, since the General Conference took place, where they just completely went hardcore on liberalism, like abortion, homosexuality. They even removed like adultery now, so you can't even accuse elders of being caught in like adultery and like all this. It's just totally insane.
Yeah.
But
Let me
but
note too, I was going to say, in this fight against liberalism, it's actually been the African Methodist churches that have done a really good job of saying like, no, we're not going to do this nonsense that the West is doing. So what it's been a lot of is like these enlightened American churches pushing modifications to the Constitution, to the Book of Order, and saying we should update this. And the African dioceses are pushing back and be like, whoa, no, we don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, isn't that ironic that the Africans who we think and paint with a broad brush as they're on our side, they would clearly be all for CRT doctrine, diversity, wokeism.
Yeah.
They're actually the conservative ones, and lo and behold, it's the white people who cry
In this
oppressor. It's the white people who are just these diehard social justice warriors for Christ. So the African is much more conservative, but then there's a whole disaffiliation, which is another topic. But I want to talk about with Wes, should the GMC have broke off from the UMC? Should that have taken place? And I think there's a good conversation because it's indicative for all of Protestants, because we see, the Anglican Church, they broke off from the Episcopalian Church of England, and now they're the ACNA, Anglican Church North America, or the REC, the Reformed Episcopalian Church. That's the conservative side. You have this with even the PC, what is it, the PCA and PCUSA?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you have it seems like the Southern Baptists are going through some disaffiliation, but they're not really so much like that. A little bit different. Another animal.
Yeah, Indianapolis this year for the Southern Baptist Convention. Southern Baptist Convention is not as rigidly governed as some other denominations are, so there's not necessarily an authority that's outside of your church. Every church is individual, but they're bound together by a common mission, and there's insistence this year. It's called the Law Amendment. It has to be ratified 2 years in a row, which would disenfellowship. So it's not kicking a church out, but it's saying we're no longer in fellowship with churches that would not affirm that women cannot be ministers. So the SBC is going through exactly this. On the Presbyterian side, they went through it in the early 1900s. This was Machen, this was Voss, this was Princeton Seminary, the fundamentalists versus the modernists. So you're exactly right. It's a story that keeps coming up again and again and again.
Yeah, and so my thing is when Redeem Zoomer gives a really good argument for what happened in the Global Methodist split off, that makes it convincing that they probably shouldn't have done this at all. And what he argues was, and I can't help, and I don't understand why we should disagree with them. So in 2019, the conservative Methodists, they won the vote. They upheld biblical traditional marriage. So why do they leave then? Why do they retreat? And I know there was a whole we had to this disaffiliation clause. Okay, but here's the issue: is what if those people, they didn't leave, and they were there at the general conference? Could they have turned the vote? And the thing is, you don't know. Like a lot of people say, oh, it's too late. You don't know what it was like, but you don't know. You didn't even get there. You didn't even allow yourself, and especially when you came off of a victory in 2019, which is not long ago at all. It's only 5 years ago. So we're not even talking about like 30 years ago, this vote happened. No, in 2019, which is huge if you think about it, as far as the mainline, denomination goes, that was a huge win. And what would have happened if the conservatives were in the UMC General Conference in 2024? Because when you remove all the conservatives and all you have left in power are these, wolves in sheep clothing, it's like, okay, it's shocking what they voted to, to put in the Book of Discipline and to remove. But, can you really blame them? Like, they showed us who they were. You know what they're for, and we just all dipped, and now they're going to vote. How could we not predict that this would go down any other way than just okay, now we'll accept homosexuality, now we'll accept the right to abort and all this stuff. It's like you could have bet your life savings on this that they would have voted this way. And like I said, hindsight is 2020. I think what we should do is that we should learn from this as Christians, whether we're in denomination or any kind of institution, to not retreat like we always consistently see in the conservative, whether that's a church, conservative church, or just in politics in general, we should stop retreating and we should hold out more.
Yep. No, I 100% agree that if you have the majority, we talked about this and it was a really good conversation. There's a huge difference between being literally 1 in 1,000 who only feels a certain way and waging war as literally a 1% of the 1% versus, as you just said, the majority. That is an entirely different paradigm of warfare. And the problem has been for a long time, conservatives being unwilling to use their power to advocate for themselves. This is World War I, World War II. It really set the stage for this kind of conservatism that didn't fight for itself. It didn't establish its own interests. And conservatives, somehow, we got it into our skulls that fighting and pushing back and actually using power to punish our enemies. This is Carl Schmitt, the concept of the political friend-enemy distinction, which is core to politics, that we just shouldn't do that. So you've got one side, the liberals, and they know what game they're playing. They're playing the game of let's kick these people out. Let's change the Constitution. Let's bring in our friends. Let's establish these sexual deviants as ministers. They know what they're doing. They have their friends. They know who the enemies are. And then you have conservatives that have just bought this idea that we can't advocate for ourselves. We don't want to punish people. We don't want to get them to do what they don't want to do. And so even though we are actually the majority in this denomination, we're going to take the loss. We're going to retreat. We're not going to be willing to hold a line and to kick people out. And so absolutely, in that case, you're the majority. You stay. And it's not just stay. Let them continue to amass their forces for another decade to bring it to another vote and try to win. You stay, and then you kick them out. This is what the Southern Baptist Convention is doing. If you are a church that thinks a woman can be a pastor, you are not in fellowship with the SBC. You're not free to be here. You're not free to send messengers to our annual convention to vote on different things. You're outside of it. And denominations, insofar as they exist over a multitude of churches, you have to be willing, not just to stand on your principles and to vote on it. Oh, every 10 years we'll bring it up for a vote and I hope we win. Stand on your principles and then actually push out those that would push against them.
Well, and think about, the liberals are really good at playing the long game. Like they understand the value of this, and conservatives don't. Because think about in 2019 in the UMC, they lost their vote. They wanted homosexuality, and they lost that vote. Did they disaffiliate? Did they make their own denomination? No, they still stuck around. It was the conservatives who won the vote. That's the one that left, and you do see this consistently. It's like what's happened in our country. It didn't happen within 4 years. It didn't happen overnight. It happened because before you and I were born. You can track the history of this. They crept in. It's a long march through the institutions, and that long march is more than just one generation. Like we don't even understand that.
Right.
And we don't even see the value in that. And we don't even believe in that, but they believe in that. And that's how they got here. They understand the value of it. Let me plant a seed. I may not see it in my lifetime, but this seed will grow and will produce fruit. And here's the thing. If it works for them, and it didn't just work, it continues to work. If it works for them, we have to believe, you better believe it. It also works on the flip side for conservatives to bunker down for the long haul and realize, hey, I might not see fruit in my lifetime. But again, playing the long game, this can work. We can flip liberal institutions and get them conservative.
I'm going to kind of disagree with you here. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Only kinda. It's kind of.
I didn't remember the movie Office
All in
Space.
or all out.
All in or all out. I completely did. No, it was like that movie, The Office Space, where the boss leans in. He's like,
"Is it neither cold nor hot?"
Yeah, I'm going to kind of disagree with you there. No, I think
you're a Baptist.
Exactly. There should be no affiliations. Liberalism is pathological in that it's something that it's almost I could say exists beneath the surface. And so really what the culmination of what this is the Enlightenment, in that we can arrive at a just society, a good society, all of these things, not through scripture, but through reason and through man's intelligence and through logic. We can fashion a society without God and without his word. So that's been since the 1700s, 250 years or so since that's been coming into fruition. For long periods of time, it hasn't worked. It's just been underneath the surface. And again, there's the manipulation. Like, well, yes, this is true, but we need to love people that don't agree with us, that don't feel the same way. Conservative thought has always been much stronger. So it's not something that like lies beneath the surface. And you see this because conservatives right now will lose their jobs if they work a secular job and they speak out about what they believe in. It's not something that like sits beneath the surface and they can gradually kind of try to push their workplace or push their institution or push their college a little bit there. They are either all in a sense, or all out. So I don't think it works in that both will do the long march to the institutions. Liberalism makes a long march to the institutions. And then what has always happened in history, not always, is there is a powerful movement that brings things back. So they march through the institutions for 100, 200 years, and then we take the institutions by force. I truly think that's our only way out of it because,
No,
a number of reasons, but go ahead.
But you know what? But even on the slavery issue, that wasn't an overnight win at all. Like you had faithful Christians who were working to abolish slavery.
Well,
So,
slavery,
and you know what too? Even in the Reformation with Martin Luther, Luther came hundreds of years later. What was it? John Huss said somebody, I forget the language he used, but like a goose is going to come.
the golden
And
goose.
Golden goose, what? Like 100 years
Swan,
later?
maybe.
Swan, something like that.
I almost want to say 200, yeah.
200 years later. So it wasn't just Martin Luther. There was a group of faithful men before him who were working towards this, and even towards slavery. There was faithful Christians, many in the Methodist tradition that were working to abolish slavery. So it wasn't just this war that happened, and within X amount of time, then this is what did it. It was a planting. It was a long, in that sense, a long march, through this institution.
Yeah. Well, slavery in and of itself is not wrong. Scripture does not say that simple servitude in and of itself
Dude, we're
is
canceled.
evil.
You just canceled us.
I know.
Dude, we're done.
Demonetized.
See you, YouTube.
No, the Bible doesn't say slavery in and of itself is wrong. Paul says if you're a servant, honor your master. If you're a master.
Chattel. What do they call it? Chattel slavery?
Yes. So kidnapping is a capital punishment in the Old Testament. That is a crime to kidnap. But slavery is just a fact of history. And the gospel certainly lends itself towards men being free, having a society where no one is literally owned or anything like that. But just literally in and of itself, slavery is a fact of life. So I don't know if that's the best example.
But the slavery in America was like that. Like that was kidnapping. There's many. To use the right word, which is not a woke word, but there were injustices as defined by the scriptures: raping, kidnapping, stealing.
Right. So Virginia itself never kidnapped a single slave. You read Dabney's account, Defense of Virginia. Some of these states never once ever crossed the sea, went to the Indies, took these slaves, brought them back. And same thing for like rape or murder. Like there are terrible accounts of slavery, but we have laws just against that in general. So if a man that owned a slave was to do something terrible to them, he should be completely punished. And we have laws if he was to murder or to beat or to rape or anything like that. Maybe we'll have to do a full discussion of it on the future. But the point is, I think of how it was abolished in England without war. They had institutional power, was what he had. I forget. It was Wilberforce, correct? That led the charge in Parliament for a number of years. He had some measure of political power. And what I'm trying to say is, in the main line right now, conservatives are starting at like 1% to 2% of the political power that is needed. So it's not as though it's like a third, 30% of the power is ours, 70% is theirs. If we really muscle down, we should be able to make a difference. My assessment of it is, this is not my prescription. I'm just looking at the field and I'm saying the amount of good conservatives willing to fight their left in these institutions is very, very minimal.
Well, I think the reason why is like we love to talk about that, but it's like, well, how'd you get there? Especially as men, like men are supposed to take responsibility, and that's a good way to track how masculine you are. So it's like, okay, let's look at who's responsible for this. How did we get to 1 or 2%? And a big factor, and if conservatives are good at one thing, one of them is making new institutions.
Yeah,
and so it's ironic because think about what the word conservative, like what that means to conserve something. So what are we conserving? What are we doing? Like even the word reform, what are we reforming? What what are we doing? Like we're just if we're constantly just retreating and saying, oh, we were going to lose. Oh, you don't know what it's like, without even getting to that fight, without even making to a 2024 conference. How do you know? Mm-hmm. Like you don't know. Like you're just saying, oh, this is what what happened. Well, you don't know. Like at least even if you're not going to fully stay, at least get to a point where it's so blatantly clear where you couldn't deny the evidence. Okay, yeah, this was a worthy retreat, rather than this, well, we were just going to lose.
Yep.
Well, how do you know that? And like, imagine if generals in history acted like that. Like, like America with Japan. Oh, they have a big, bigger navy than us. We're going to lose.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what we did. We used, tenacity, went up against them, and actually worked.
Yep.
But if America had that retreatism attitude, we would just retreated, and Japan probably would have just taken
Right.
our navy out fully with their navy, and they had the bigger navy, by the way, which is very interesting.
I was about to challenge you on that, but it sounds like you're correct that they had the bigger navy.
They did. Yeah.
Really interesting. But in every battle, a general or a leader is going to say, "This fight we can't win." So the enemy will be, and we used this example we were talking a couple weeks ago. They'll be entrenched in a hill, and they will be dug in. And to use this illustration of the church, their numbers are dwindling, though. These churches, these mainline denominations, they are aging out because there's no families in them. There's no young children. They're not going to be replaced. These churches are slowly dying. So the enemy has a fortified defensive position on this hill. And there are times in real warfare where generals say, we can't take that right now. We simply can't. We simply don't have the force. We don't have the numbers. At this exact moment, we don't. Now, what we have as Christians and as conservatives here in this nation, well, we don't have a lot of time, but we have more time than they do. They're going to age out. Their churches will eventually be empty. We have time, and the longer the time goes on, we'll amass numbers. We'll have children, we'll train men for ministry, we'll train evangelists, we'll capture more through the culture war. So looking at the situation, I agree. There was compromise upon compromise for decades leading up to this. But the situation is right now, there are a lot of fortresses that the enemy has. And we can say, oh, this is retreatism. We have to go take them back. Yeah, but they're dug in. And I'm trying to think of maybe a video game I played or something illustrating it. But when you just send little pockets kind of at the same fortified thing, a lot of times they're just picked off. Like if you use your pawns, like you send 2 pawns in against the queen and then 3 pawns in over here, and then the rest of your pawns, you're not going to win. You need an all-out strategic attack to capture a decisive victory when you're attacking the enemy's position. So the enemy has a position. I think it's going to be a strategic, fast, and decisive at the right time, letting them get as weak as possible, letting us get as strong as possible, and then absolutely retaking them. But it might take a decade or two before we're ready for that.
Well, and it also predicates upon we do the right things as well, because there is, it's going to sound weird, but there's actually good news when a church denomination says we're going to allow LGBT and affirm them and welcome them. There's good news in that. Why is that good news? Because they're only so they have one generation left, because you just injected yourself with poison, like Wes said. If you have 10 to 15 people coming there, and now say 5 of them are gay, these people are not going to have kids. If they do, it will be the exception, not the norm. And there's no families there. There's no future legacy.
And they're not having 8 kids, even if they adopt or kidnap.
Yeah, even just one.
Real kidnapping, by the way, surrogacy. When gay men pretend to have a child, that's actual real life slavery/kidnapping. But at most, they have 1 or 2, not 8, not 10.
It's so self-radical, it implodes upon itself. Is what it does. But as I said, though, too, we can't get lazy, because at the same time, this is why liberals see the value of going after your kids. Right. So if you send your kids to these woke colleges, don't be surprised if you send them to Caesar, they come back as Romans. So that's why, conservatives can't get too lax. And I think regardless, whether this is strategy, as you say, Wes, basically, you're probably not going to like me for saying this, but it's retreatism. And I understand what you're saying. You're saying it's a strategic, retreat. We'll pull them back now so they can die, and then we'll come in and take it. I understand that, but I still think going forward, Christians should be less retreatist and should bunker down for the long haul, more so than they do now, and stop forming new institutions. See the value of the current institutions, as the left does as well, fight for them, and also make sure that they don't come for your kids, and do whatever you can to to defend them for the next generation. Like, there are principles that we can learn, like hindsight 2020, and one of them is that we need to just stop freaking retreating, and everybody does that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we are so bad off, and one of the reasons we are so bad off is because we have no capital. We don't have big universities for training students that are completely conservative. We don't have large trusts full of money. We don't have legacy media like the New York Times. You look across the map, and on every single level, from media, from entertainment, from colleges and universities and seminaries and training and equipping, every single one of these things just about is owned by our enemies. And so we, by our retreatism, I'll give you that is an actual example of it. By our retreatism, we now left ourselves fighting down 10-1 on the odds ratio, the amount of troops, the amount of the enemy that there is there, and left ourselves down 10-1 on resources. So it's not as though we're down 10-1, but we're pumping out 1,500 grads from Hillsdale's College that are not woke, strong, godly men. We are down all of that, and we have barely these structures in place. Like some of the best seminaries right now, the ones that are even good, I mean, they are like 50 people. Some of them aren't even formal training programs. So we're literally assembling the plane in midair as we're trying to fly. It's like, all right, young man, you got to be trained. But also, we are in the midst of the culture war, and we don't have time to teach you all the things that we need to teach you necessarily. And so it's going to be good men that are able to learn it on the fly, to get engaged in the war, do good as ministers. But we really did shoot ourselves in the foot by losing all of these institutions. Not at once, not in a moment, but like with the GMC, capitulating. Well, we have the majority, but we wouldn't want to kick out the people that are completely compromised on biblical sexuality. That seems a little cruel. When we did that, we lost so much. And it's part of the reason we are down as we are. I mean, you could say we're down 51-10 in the first quarter. Well, game's not over, but...
And what conservatives are really ignorant of is that when they make these new institutions, they think this is just as good as the last. Everybody's going to see it. Everybody will know it. Look at us. Look, ta-da, we're fine now. We're new, starting fresh.
Yep.
What's interesting though is that when you look at like how the world was watching the UMC General Conference, a lot of them don't really know about the Global Methodists so much. They think this is all Methodism, and even like the CREC. Jug Wilson's split off to denomination. Like only the people who really care about that and who are in the Doug Wilson world really know about that world. Like the rest just sees a Presbyterian church with a gay flag on the outside. It's kind of like think of that app Parler. Remember Parler?
I do, yeah.
Truth Social, right? But the majority of the people use Twitter or X now, as they call it. Right. It's not like, oh, we just made something new. Now every single conservative, see ya, we're going over here. It doesn't happen. Mm-mm. And we're ignorant thinking that this is just good, good as always. And we're also in our own bubble. It's like people, and again, like, and unless you're in like the Doug Wilson world, you wouldn't know about the CREC.
Right.
Outside, people just see Presbyterian churches. That's it.
Yep.
Outside, people would just see, UMC churches. That's it. A lot of them don't really know about the Global Methodist Church and don't really know, if they heard it, it's not really sticking with them, and they don't really think, oh, these are the conservative Methodists. They just, I don't know. It's just, again, Methodism to them is that local gay town or gay pride flag on that church that they drive past every, now and then.
And to my point, though, look how Twitter was recaptured by slowly getting our guys jobs or whatever. No, someone with the most money in the world saying, I'm going to take it over, and actually having the power to do that. And I think the same thing goes for some of these denominations with a lot of resources and a lot of influence and a lot of pull. We need to take them back. It is non-negotiable. We don't want them to die. They have a lot. But the taking them back will be a decisive power play. And we just don't have the power. And I mean, I said this to you. I'd want to say it to anyone else considering it. Especially think about this when you have kids. So if a single man says, I'm going to take this PCA church in town, and me and the boys, we're going to go cause trouble. Yes and amen. But when you have kids and you have a family, that conversation is different. And there is a valid category. I mean, the Puritans, they took their family and they left England. They could have fought, but they left for the new world to be able to worship. And because they knew their family and raising them and being able to have a Christian government free from coercion of the conscience was important. And so assess your situation in life. Look at the other good churches around you. It may be valid. If you don't have kids, you're rock solid, your wife is rock solid, you're a single man, to go take over that church that's 15 elderly people in town. But it also might not be. That would be my caution. That would be what I would say to the Reconquista.
Well, and I would also say, too, is that another thing that conservatives need to get better at is, a lot of times they're also ignorant of this, too. Is like, if I just have, 10 kids, like, and just go to church every Sunday, then it'll be better, with one generation. Do that and also get into the politics side of it. Yep. And I don't mean like you run for your state governor. Like I'm talking about like, at the church, get into a leadership position, because it's not just going to be the laymen. It's also going to be the laymen rising up into those, those positions where you're a lay elder, you're a youth group leader, you're a Sunday school leader, like whatever, you can. Like even, in the UMC, like the Young Methodists for Tradition, one of their plans is to be a lay delegate where you can go to these conferences and actually vote.
Yeah.
Do that. It's not just going to be, let me just go here, again, like have 10 kids and then it'll be better. Oh, 20 years from now, then it'll be better. I'm a post mill. 20 years from now, then it'll be better. You need both of that.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to take a shot at post mill or a cheap shot.
No, there's post mills that they think like, the golden age of Christendom should be here. Probably, I would say by the time my kids are in high school. Like, no, we have a long way to go, and we do have to play the long game at some points. Absolutely, your eschatology is not a cop out for action.
Yeah, exactly. Now
that goes for pre-mill too. That goes for pre-mill. Like, well, Jesus is coming back. Yes, he may be, but he better find you busy. So both sides need to make sure they don't use that as a reason. Like, what can we say? Whether it works out or gets worse in the end.
Well, it's interesting because you hear like Stephen Wolf's an amillennialist, and he talks about how he's not a post-mill, and one of the critiques he gives is, and this is related to pre-mill, by the way, not post-mill, but one of the things he talks about is how the post-mill is thinking, not all of them obviously, but they're thinking, okay, again, a future golden generation is coming. I'll just wait for it. And as an amillennialist, he thinks, no, it's not coming. So what I do here actually matters. The pre-mill can also think like that too. Yeah, Christ may come tomorrow. Right. But in the meantime, let me just be faithful and bunker down and see if I can take this institution for Christ.
Yep.
And so, this really isn't an eschatology. Like I know a lot of people frame it as, oh, you got to be a post-mill, otherwise you're just going to be a loser and not think about this. It's not. It really isn't an eschatology thing.
Yep.
Thing that will get you going in the right direction.
Yeah. No, 100%. We have to do the hard work for thousands of years. Just like the post-mill should be functionally amil in his efforts, as in it matters how far we move the ball down the field. Taking ground for King Jesus matters. We may actually lose this round. We may lose this battle. Jesus has promised we're going to win the war, but we may lose this battle. He should almost be amil in his orientation, even if he is still post-millennial in his conception or his idea or his expectation of the end of time.
One last thing I want to say too is one of the things that I noticed when I talked to Global Methodists is that they seem to take like the Richard Ackermans, the Reform Zoomers, the Reconquistas, the Young Methodists, for Tradition. And they think, oh, you're just a young buck and you don't know what you're talking about. And I think you need to watch out for that kind of thinking. Not just if you're an older person, but also if you're a younger person who's trying to do this, because you're going to have people going to be like, oh, you can't do this. Just give up now. Like, don't even try. Trust me, we've been there. And there's a lot of pride in that. Oh, we've been there. You don't know what it's like. Because it's hard to admit, I probably, maybe I shouldn't have retreated. I'm not saying that it was entirely a mistake, but I'm just saying, at the very least, it's hard to even think about and question, did I make the right mistake? Like, you don't want to think like I was wrong. I was wrong. I shouldn't have left. It's hard to admit that sometimes. And with older people, there's this tendency, if you're young, oh, you're a little too, hot for Christ right now. I remember I used to be just like you, but you wait a couple years and then you'll be kind of more chill and relaxed and like me, when it's like, no, brother, you probably just lost your fire and you need to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just compromised. Yeah. The boomer generation, they had it good, and they gave, in many respects, they gave the next generation, the millennials, a really, really bad hand. And I'm a millennial and I'm not complaining. God's blessed me a lot. So this is not me, renting and unable to buy a home and complaining about boomers and their wealth. Like, generally speaking, they left a bad hand. And you're exactly right that, like, with their kids that apostatized, it can be really tough. It can really hurt your pride to say, yeah, actually, now I'm realizing that I sent my kid away, just like we talked about last week. I sent them away to children's church. They never actually did come to church. And then they apostatized, but I'm realizing they never really went to church to begin with. They were never catechized. They were never taught to make their faith their own. They were never instructed in the sacraments as means of grace. We never did any of that. And to then come to grips and say, I got it wrong. That's such an amount of the temptation to pride in that is understandable. And much like the Promised Land in the 40 years, there might have to be a generation that passes that stops saying exactly that to the young men that you're talking about right there. Like, young men, oh, you're just zealous. You're just all caught up in the culture war. Even if I would disagree, I would never say that to a young man. I think of First John. He's encouraging young men. Young men, I write to you because you are strong, because you have overcome the evil one, and the word richly abides in you. I write to you, little children, your sins are forgiven. The orientation should always be to young individuals, taking a stand for Christ, pushing back against wickedness. Amen, brother. I love to see that. How can I help you? How can I encourage you? How can I provide some type of support?
Yeah, well, Paul to Timothy, right? Let no man, despise your youth. Last, I just want to say, an application, as I said in the beginning, like what's done is done. Hindsight is 2020. One of the things that the GMC and all these other new institutions should make sure that never happens again is that they never let this happen again. And they just say, okay, we're going to stop breaking off. Like we're not going to, we're going to bunker down for the long haul. Even if the bad people are in power and they say you got to marry, the same sex members, just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just have that tenacity, and have that faithfulness to say, I don't care, come hell or high water, I'm not leaving. Planting a flag here. I'm not going away unless you throw me in, physically in jail.
Right.
And have that determination to not let this happen again. Because if you did it once, you'll do it twice, you'll do it a third time. Like, it has to stop somewhere. You can't just keep doing this and expect, oh man, why is the nation this way? Why is the country this way? Well, look at your history. You keep on retreating, you keep on giving up, and you keep on making new institutions thinking they're going to be great, and nobody actually cares, let alone even knows about these new institutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I think it was a good episode, right? That's a wrap.
Yeah, that was a wrap.
Amen.
Praise God. Let's go take back these godless institutions.
Yeah, we normally meet on Wednesdays at 3 p.m., but we just release this one a little bit early. You can please like and share and get this video out. Let us know what you think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree. We welcome all inclusiveness in our comment section.
We will disagree with you, but we do welcome you to leave the comment.
Yep, amen. All right, guys, take care and God bless.